Weird war facts. One of the original 5 Japanese cities that the US planned on nuking was its former capital, Kyoto. The only reason it wasn't bombed was because US Secretary of War Henry Stimson spent his honeymoon there and called it a nice place. So instead of Kyoto, they chose Nagasaki. Roman Emperor Caligula once declared war on Neptune, god of the seas. His men ran at the ocean and stabbed the water for a short time before surrendering. World War II ace pilot Douglas Bader flew with no legs. This became a surprising advantage against G-force, making him less likely to pass out. A quiet American prisoner of war was nicknamed the Incredibly Stupid One by Vietnamese captors. But upon his return to the US, he provided the names of 200 other prisoners of war, which he had memorized to the tune of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. During World War II, JFK was stranded in the Solomon Islands and ended up carving a message into a coconut. A native islander delivered it to the closest US military base and saved his life. When he became president, Kennedy used the coconut as a paperweight on his desk in the Oval Office. This is a 1942 photo of Japanese troops using prisoners of war for target practice. During World War II, a German pilot spotted an American pilot's crippled plane in the sky. He noticed that the gunner was dead, the crew was injured, and that they didn't pose any threat. So instead of destroying the plane, he led it to safety and spared the men's lives. 40 years later, the two pilots reunited and became fishing buddies. Before making his name in Hollywood, Rob Riggle served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 23 years. He received several awards and commendations for his service in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Liberia. This is how enemy aircraft was detected before the invention of radar. During World War II, there was a Soviet woman whose husband was killed by the Nazis. To avenge her husband's death, the woman sold all of her possessions and bought a tank, which she nicknamed the Fighting Girlfriend. With permission from the Soviet Union, she hunted down Nazis with her own tank. Teddy Roosevelt's son Quentin fought in World War I as a pilot. He was killed in a dogfight and his plane crashed behind enemy lines. But the Germans gave him a full military burial with honors. They apparently admired the fact that a president's son chose to fight. During World War II, prisoners of war were treated so nicely in Canada that many of them didn't want to leave when they were released. During the same war, Soviet forces tried to train dogs to run under enemy tanks with bombs on their backs. However, this evil plan fortunately ended up failing miserably. Because the dogs had been trained using Soviet tanks, when it came to the real battlefield, many dogs ended up running under friendly Soviet tanks, blowing them up instead. This is what most of the trenches used during World War I look like today. At 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning, residents in the German town of Limburg woke up to the sound of a sudden blast. The next morning, they found a crater the size of a house in a nearby cornfield. Authorities soon determined that the blast was created by a 500-pound German bomb from World War II that spontaneously detonated. William Hitler despised his uncle Adolf and fled from Germany to fight for the US during World War II. William's sons also agreed to never have children in order to kill off Hitler's bloodline. During World War II, Michelangelo's statue of David was encased in bricks to prevent damage from bombs. On Christmas in 1914 during World War I, the British and Germans laid down their weapons. They crossed over no man's land and joined each other to celebrate the holiday. They exchanged food, played games, and even attended burials for each side. It was seen as a symbolic moment during the brutal war. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was shot in West Germany in 1970. Producers for the film had a hard time finding little people to cast as Oompa Loompas since so many of them had been killed by Nazis during the Holocaust. During the Cold War, CIA agents used a secret method of communication based on how their shoelaces were tied. In 2016, a Chinese man realized the object he had been using to cut open walnuts for 25 years was actually a live stick grenade from the Vietnam War. During World War I and II, fingers were used to reconstruct noses. The patients got a new nose but lost a finger in return. A Japanese soldier named Hiroru Onada was stranded on an island for 30 years without knowing that World War II had ended. His commander had to travel to the island to personally dismiss him in 1974. Upon returning home, he became a national hero. More planes were destroyed during World War II than the number of planes that exist in the entire world today. Some warships used to be painted like optical illusions. The purpose of this dazzle camouflage was not to conceal a ship, but rather to mislead the enemy by making the ship's speed and range more difficult to estimate, much to the same effect as patterns seen on zebras, jaguars, and giraffes. In 1964, the US Army performed an experiment to see if 3 young physics students could design an atomic bomb. They had no specific knowledge of nuclear weapons and were only given access to publicly available documents. Within 3 years, they succeeded. Over 160 years ago, a Frenchman and a Russian shot at each other during the Crimean War and their bullets collided. During World War II, a Nazi officer ordered his soldiers to hold their fire to allow for the rescue of an American soldier who had stepped on a landmine. When no one came for help, the officer went to rescue the soldier but stepped on a landmine himself. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Churchill held 42 Nazi soldiers hostage while wielding a sword during a 1942 raid in occupied Norway. Nicknamed Mad Jack, he also had the only confirmed kill of a Nazi while using a longbow. During World War II, Dr. Eugene Lazowski saved the lives of over 8,000 Jews in the town of Rozvadov. He managed to fake a typhus epidemic that prevented the Nazis from entering the town. Several indigenous tribes on Pacific Islands thought that cargo dropped for US soldiers during World War II were gifts from the gods. Once American soldiers left, many of these islanders built ceremonial planes and airstrips so that God would drop them more cargo. They're known as cargo cults, and many of them are still active today. Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Drexel Biddle was a master in hand-to-hand combat. He used to order his troops to surround him with bayonets before single-handedly disarming each of them without any of his own weapons. This photo of one such demonstration was taken in 1943. Tsar Bomba was the largest bomb ever set off by far. It produced a mushroom cloud 168 times taller than the Empire State Building. Its power output was 1.4% of the sun's, and it sent shockwaves that traveled around the Earth 3 times. After a battle in Vietnam, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez had 37 puncture wounds, exposed intestines, and a broken jaw. He was pronounced dead until he spit in the face of a doctor who was zipping him up in a body bag. During World War II, Yang Kyung-jong was a Korean soldier who was captured by the Japanese and forced to fight the Soviets. He was then captured by the Soviets and forced to fight the Germans. Eventually, he was captured by the Germans and forced to defend Normandy, where he was finally captured by Americans and sent to a prison camp. He is the only known soldier to have ever fought on 3 sides of a war. During World War II, many zoo animals in Germany were taken care of by civilians in their own homes. In 1961, the US Army accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb on North Carolina. The bomb was 260 times more powerful than the nuke dropped on Hiroshima. Only a single switch prevented it from detonating. In 1932, Australia declared war on about 20,000 emus that were destroying farmland. While a number of birds were killed, the emu population persisted and ended up winning the war. Switzerland's military has remained neutral since 1815, but the entire country is rigged to explode. Thousands of demolition points are wired into bridges, highways, and railroads across the nation to quickly halt invaders. During World War II, German tank drivers in Africa would drive over camel poop for good luck. The Allies caught wind of this and responded by planting landmines disguised as camel poop. Once the Germans realized this, they began running over piles that already had tire tracks over them. In turn, the Allies made mines that looked like overrun camel poo. While serving in the US military, Mr. T was ordered by a sergeant to chop down trees as a punishment. He ended up cutting down more than 70 trees in about 4 hours until a shocked major superseded the sergeant and ordered him to stop. In 1916, there was a proposed amendment to the US Constitution that would put all acts of war to a national vote. Anyone who voted yes would have to register as a volunteer for service in the US Army. The Battle of Normandy was so intense that about 4% of the sand at Normandy Beach is made up of broken down shrapnel from D-Day. To fight in World War I, a lot of young boys had lied about their age, but Serbian soldier Momcilo Gavric was easily the youngest. He was accepted into his unit at the age of 7 and was promoted to corporal by the time he turned 8. During World War II, the Polish army officially enlisted a brown bear named Wojtek. He enjoyed drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, and wrestling, as he served as a morale booster for soldiers. Bill Millen was a personal piper who played his bagpipes on D-Day while his fellow comrades were getting killed all around him. The only reason German snipers didn't shoot him was because they thought he had gone mad. During the Vietnam War, John Donahue took a plane from New York City and snuck into the war zone to deliver beer to his buddies. It is known as the greatest beer run ever, and there have been multiple documentaries made about it. In 1973, the U.S. Army developed an anti-tank grenade by hollowing out a Nerf football and filling it with explosive charges. However, the prototype never made it to the battlefield, since the explosives gave the ball a wild and unpredictable flight. According to the Geneva Conventions, if you play dead to kill an enemy in a war scenario, then you are committing a war crime. During World War II, it was common for soldiers to keep photos of their loved ones under transparent grips on their M1911 pistols. They were known as sweetheart grips. American soldier Henry Gunther was killed just 1 minute before World War I was officially ended. He bravely charged at a German roadblock filled with armed soldiers. The Germans tried waving him off, knowing that the armistice would be signed within a few moments. Apparently he got too close, fired a couple rounds, and was killed instantly. Sunken World War II ships at the bottom of the ocean are actually extremely valuable. They're one of the only sources of steel in the world that remains uncontaminated by nuclear radiation. Though you may not recognize him, you probably wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for this man. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, Vasily Arkhipov of the Soviet Navy was ordered to fire a nuclear torpedo. But even though he was second in command, he refused. If it wasn't for his decision, a nuclear war would have broken out across the world. These photos show what 4 years of fighting in World War II did to the face of a young Soviet man. As the museum caption reads, the first face looks at you, the second face looks through you. During World War I, a carrier pigeon named Cher Ami was shot, blinded, and had her leg blown off. But she was still able to deliver an important message and save the lives of nearly 200 men. About 2,000 tons of unexploded bombs are still found in Germany each year. In the Vietnam War, American sniper Carlos Hathcock was a legend in the U.S. Marine Corps with his 93 confirmed kills. During one instance, he volunteered to crawl for 3 days across 2,000 meters of open field containing an enemy headquarters. He took a single shot that killed a North Vietnamese general and crawled back out without being spotted. During a World War II battle in the Pacific, American soldier Thomas Baker was badly wounded but refused to be evacuated. Instead, he ordered his squad to leave him propped up against a tree with nothing but a pistol and 8 bullets. Later, they returned to find Baker dead holding an empty pistol, with 8 dead Japanese soldiers lying around him. 65 years after it crash-landed on a beach in Wales, an American P-38 fighter plane emerged from the sand where it lay buried. After Colonel Robert Gould Shaw was killed in the Second Battle of Fort Wagner in 1863, he was buried in a mass grave as an insult for leading the first all-black regiment in American history. When troops tried to recover his body, his father proudly said, "We will not have his body removed from where it lies, surrounded by his brave and devoted soldiers." During World War I, Hungarian soldier Paul Kern was shot in the head and lost part of his frontal lobe. However, instead of killing him, the gunshot otherwise made him unable to sleep. And as a result, the man stayed awake for the next 40 years until his death in 1955. A few doctors theorized that Kern likely fell asleep for seconds at a time throughout the day without even realizing it. Other doctors believed that the bullet tore away the part of his brain that needed to be replenished by sleep. But to this day, researchers still can't explain how he was able to survive for so long without sleeping. The arm of Civil War General Thomas Stonewall Jackson has its own grave. In 1863, his arm had to be amputated after he was accidentally shot by his own Confederate troops. But he was so famous that no one could bear to throw the arm into the pile of discarded limbs. So instead, it was given its own burial. M&Ms were invented in 1941 so that American soldiers could enjoy chocolate that was heat-resistant and easy to transport during World War II. Initially, they were sold exclusively to the US military. During World War II, a Dutch minesweeper evaded the Japanese for 8 days disguised as an island. The crew covered the decks in trees and painted exposed surfaces to look like rocks. They moved only at night and anchored close to the shore during the day, eventually escaping to Australia. Ben Salomon was a dentist in the US Army who was shot 24 times while defending a medical center against the Japanese during World War II. He died after killing up to 98 attackers and allowing the wounded to be evacuated. His Medal of Honor was delayed until 2002 because medical officers were not supposed to bear arms against the enemy. Also during World War II, American soldier John Fox died after deliberately calling an artillery strike on himself. Realizing that German troops were overriding his position, the strike delayed the enemy long enough for other American units to organize a counterattack. In 1941, a Polish soldier named Witold Pilecki volunteered to be placed in a concentration camp to prove to the Allies that the Holocaust was real. While a prisoner at Auschwitz, he organized resistance movements and eventually escaped after 3 years of imprisonment. Until he escaped, little had been known by the rest of the world about how the Germans ran the camps, as they were thought to be internment camps or large prisons rather than death camps. In 1958, the U.S. Air Force lost a 7,600-pound hydrogen bomb in Savannah, Georgia. It remains unfound somewhere in the Wassaw Sound to this day. In 1976, Princeton undergraduate John Aristotle Phillips wrote his thesis on how to build an atomic bomb. He ended up getting an A on the paper, but never got it back because it was seized by the FBI. During World War II, the London Zoo had to kill all of its venomous animals in case the zoo was bombed and the animals escaped. During that same war, Juliana the Great Dane was awarded the Blue Cross Medal after putting out a bomb by peeing on it. In 2008, a British Marine named Matthew Croucher flung himself back first onto a grenade to save his comrades. Though the explosion threw him into the air, the blast was absorbed by his rucksack. He was prepared to die but managed to walk away with nothing but a nosebleed and a headache. On August 6, 1945, Tsutomu Yamaguchi was on business in Hiroshima when the first atomic bomb exploded. The blast ruptured his eardrums, blinded him temporarily, and left serious burns all over his body. 2 days later, he returned to his job in Nagasaki, and his co-workers called him crazy as he recounted the details of a single bomb destroying an entire city. Just then, a second atomic bomb was dropped nearby, wiping out most of Nagasaki, but Yamaguchi survived again. He is the only man who is officially recognized for surviving both nuclear explosions. Nicknamed White Death, Finnish sniper Simo Häyhä killed over 500 Soviet soldiers during the Winter War. He did it in less than 100 days using nothing but a hunting rifle with no scope. When asked what he felt while killing an enemy soldier, he responded, "The recoil." This was the breastplate of 19-year-old Antoine Frevaux. He was struck and killed by a cannonball while serving under Napoleon Bonaparte during the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. These German prisoners of war were forced to watch a film on the atrocities of the Holocaust. Many of them were outright horrified and even burned their Nazi uniforms after watching the footage. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the US government issued Mickey Mouse gas masks in case of a chemical attack. The incentive was to make them appear less scary to kids, but most people don't think it worked. An atomic bomb cameraman accidentally ripped off his safety goggles a few seconds before the bomb exploded. He immediately covered his eyes with his hands, and when the bomb detonated, he saw the bones of his hands through his closed eyelids just like an X-ray. When the Soviet Union was pushing towards Berlin during World War II, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. Insane war tactics. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. conducted a psychological warfare scheme known as Operation Wandering Soul. The Army played creepy sounds and voices through loudspeakers to represent the spirits of dead Viet Cong soldiers. Here's an example of a recording. In 2013, Sweden submerged a neon sign of a gay soldier to deter Russian submarines from entering their waters. Using sonar, the sign emits the message, "This way if you are gay," in Morse code. There have been no reports of Russian submarine sightings ever since. In 1944, the Ghost Army was created as the first tactical deception unit in the U.S. Army. They used inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and loudspeakers blaring sound effects to throw off their enemies. The Ghost Army was able to make a force seem 30 times larger than its actual size, often sending the Nazis retreating. A U.S. naval destroyer once won a battle against a Japanese submarine by throwing potatoes at them, which the Japanese thought were grenades and quickly retreated. Ancient Persian leader Cambyses II once used cats to defeat an Egyptian army. Knowing that the Egyptians viewed felines as sacred, he brought hundreds of cats to the front lines and had his soldiers paint them on their shields. The Egyptians simply refused to fight and were easily defeated as a result. When going to battle against enemies riding elephants, the Indian Rajputs would put fake trunks on their horses, making them appear as baby elephants, which the enemy's elephants refused to attack. These are some of the craziest war tactics that actually worked. Hannibal of Carthage was famous for intimidating his Roman enemies through the use of war elephants. But the Romans eventually learned that elephants are afraid of squealing pigs. So they would lather pigs in tar and set them on fire, sending the enemy elephants fleeing in horror. A Chinese general with only 100 men once had to defend a town against 150,000 troops. So he told his men to hide, left the gates open, and sat on the walls playing a lute. Certain that it was a trap, the opposing general ordered a full retreat. One of the reasons why the plague was spread to Europe was because the Mongols literally sent it there. When they were trying to conquer the city of Kaffa, they would catapult infected bodies over the city walls. This was also one of the first historical accounts of biological warfare. There was a famous Jewish boxer named Salomo Aruch who was imprisoned at Auschwitz. He was forced to fight fellow prisoners, and the loser was sent to the gas chambers. He survived more than 200 fights over a 2-year span until the camp was liberated. 80% of the males born in the Soviet Union in 1923 were killed during World War II. During the Holocaust, gay males were identified in concentration camps by downward-facing pink triangles. Because of this identification, many of them were still considered criminals after their camps were liberated. As a result, many of them were sent back to prison to serve out their terms.